Okay, today I'm going to expose this person. His name is Jaymes Lackey, and I'm going to expose him for the, I would say, compulsive liar that he is, or even pathological liar. But I want to use him as an example of how to deal with liars, because I had a long conversation with him, and I used a few specific techniques to expose him, and he really took some really bad L's in this conversation. L's means losses. Some really bad L's in this conversation. I will show that, but I want to use this as a video to instruct people. This is how you deal with a liar. Or you could also say this is how you deal with a sociopathic or narcissistic person. These are some of the good techniques for probably all those situations, because I've debated people on Facebook, Twitter for a long time. I just like to see how people think. I enjoy it, and it's not for everybody, but I want to get into this tweet here that Allie Beth Stuckey made. She says, because this is what he responded to, and then I got in a long discussion with him. Allie Beth Stuckey says, in 2016, they called us bigots for supporting Trump. 2018, they called us misogynists for defending Kavanaugh. 2020, they called us grandma killers for questioning masks, and racist for criticizing BLM. And she just goes on the whole litany, because the media has been falsely labeling Trump supporters all these bad things for 10 years, right? None of it has been true. And she's basically saying we've been vindicated. None of this was true. It was all propaganda. And then this person, Jaymes Lackey, he says, for a Christian, you sure sound like a court prophet. Are you seeking first the kingdom of God or America first? And I'm like, that's how it sounds. Like, what? You have to choose either to seek God or to support your country? Those are not mutually exclusive. And I'm like, this is a really strange kind of accusation to make, because it's a question, but he's kind of accusing her. You're not following the kingdom of God because you're America first, even though this tweet was just basically saying, like, these are all lies and false accusations against Trump supporters. And so I'm like, how could he find fault with somebody saying something good and true? And that's what I said. I'm like, she's advocating for what is good. What is good helps people. And I refer to the Bible, and I'm like, it's in the Bible, that's biblical to do. And then he says, that stuff is not good or godly, whatever she's saying, right? And I said, truth isn't good or godly? And he says, it's not true. And that's where I wanted him to get to, because he's making these vague accusations, this false choice fallacy here. And I wanted to get him to a place where he puts his goalpost down of not true. So by saying not true, he's saying all her statements here are not true. And that also means that he agrees with all these accusations. He agrees you were bigoted for supporting Trump. You were misogynist for defending Kavanaugh. You were a grandma killer for questioning masks. You were a racist for criticizing BLM. You were cruel for celebrating the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So I got him to put down his goalpost. So I want to now debunk this, but I don't want to debunk all of that. It's going to take me too much time. Whenever you get a laundry list like this, and you've seen it for a long time, like some people go TDS and they have a whole laundry list of things, accusations against Trump. And it would take too long to debunk. So a better way is pick the easiest one to debunk. And if they're all pretty much the same, just pick the first one. But pick the one you think you'll be able to prove the easiest and the most conclusively. Pick that one, debunk it, force them to admit they're wrong about that. And if they won't admit the easiest one, why would they admit the other ones that aren't as easy? Right? So you're saving yourself time. And if they won't admit something obvious that you've proven, like conclusively, then you can just point out you're just not an honest person. And I've debunked all your dumb arguments about it. You're still not accepting it. So why would me doing that with these other ones be any different? You're just going to lie about those two after I debunk them. Right? So you're basically debunking all of them by debunking one of them, if they won't come to terms with the truth of what you're saying. then you've basically debunked all of them, even if you haven't debunked all of them. So that's my method, and I'll show you. And that's what I say. I say we can go one by one. And by the way, if he was to admit, or somebody was to admit after I debunked it, if they were to say, okay, you're right about that one, then I would say that's a victory too. I would say, good. Well, I just convinced them of the truth. So they admitted that. Now I can go on to the next one. But just spoiler alert, people usually won't admit it because they're just too triggered or they're just not right. At least you've debunked them to their face. I say we can go one by one. It's cruel to celebrate the overturning of Roe v. Wade, because I thought that was the most ridiculous one. You believe abortion is killing a baby, and it's cruel to celebrate the overturning of Roe v. Wade? That seems very weird to me. And I expected that he would say something about the women, like the women have unwanted pregnancies and you're not allowing them to have an abortion. But it turns out, I'm pretty sure from this conversation that he's pro-life, which I didn't expect. And I asked Rock, is he pro-life? And it said, yeah, he's sort of pro-life. It kind of gave me a little bit of rundown. So I was like, okay, well, that was unexpected. He's pro-life saying this, which is kind of worse in a way, because you're pro-life. You didn't even buy that argument that you should consider the women and allow them to get abortions. You don't even believe that. So how can you say it's cruel to celebrate the overturning of Roe v. Wade when you're pro-life? That's very strange. But he says this is his argument, and this is the cascade of just unbelievable attempts to make a narrative. He says more abortions now than before, because abortions did go up after they repealed Roe v. Wade. That is true. So it went slightly up. It caused states to enshrine abortion rights in their state constitutions. It did. Democrat states enshrined abortion rights. Some of them did, or made other concessions or workarounds to help people in red states get abortions in their state, or shield laws to protect abortion providers so that they wouldn't be sued. Stuff like that. The Democrats did a lot of that stuff, and the abortion rate did rise. So that is true. And I said, that's actually not what I asked, because I wasn't asking about what happened with abortion. I was asking, is it cruel? Is it cruel for pro-life people? Like, that's true. Abortions did go up. That doesn't mean the people that celebrated Roe v. Wade being overturned were cruel. That doesn't follow. And so I said, that's not what I asked. Why did you dodge? This is bearing false witness, because he claims to be a Christian, and he's bearing false witness, not answering my question, but kind of changing the subject. Is dodging bearing false witness? He says, I'm cutting to the heart of the issue. No, he's not. He's actually changing the subject. Because I'm not playing your games. Okay, this is projection. He's playing games. He's not answering my question. I'm bringing it back to what my question was. He says, why would you celebrate more dead babies? Seems bad. But they weren't celebrating. See the false accusation that they were celebrating dead babies? They weren't celebrating dead babies. They were celebrating the repeal of Roe v. Wade. That's what they were celebrating. And they expected there to be less abortions. And I said, dodging is false witness, yes. And I just made an analogy about if your wife asked you if you were cheating and you said, well, 55% of men cheat, that is a form of bearing false witness. And I bring it back to the question about the characterization that celebrating the overturning of Roe v. Wade is cruel or not. Is it cruel? Simple yes, no. I'm just looking for an answer. And then he says, I'm not reading all that. So now he doesn't have a blue check mark, so he can't write as long as me. So he's kind of saying, I'm not reading all that. I'm happy to engage if you have the normal character limit. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. He can't write as much as me. I don't want to filibuster him. And he only wants to engage if we can write the same amount. That's fair. Even though actually it's actually not really that fair, because debunking a false accusation takes 2 or 3 times longer to actually make a false accusation. So he's just making false accusation after false accusation. And I am forced to debunk them in the same amount of characters when it requires more characters. But I'm like, that's fine. But then he says, the difference is I owe my wife. I don't owe you anything. only what is owed to any human. Yes, but you do owe me honesty. Yes, especially as a Christian. If you're a Bible-believing person, he's saying, I don't owe you anything. Can you imagine a pastor saying that? I don't owe you honesty. I don't owe you directness. I don't owe you being upfront, being clear. I don't owe you any of that. Can you imagine a pastor saying that to you? I mean, that's probably why this sort of situation bothers me when I see a Christian, especially a pastor, saying a bunch of false things against conservatives. And I'm like, how can this be? But anyway, we'll go on. But I skipped something. This is the second method. So my first method I showed you was just, if there's a laundry list of accusations, just pick one to debunk. That's the first thing. And if they agree, if they will admit it, then go on to the next one. If they won't agree, just keep hammering it home, or just call them a liar. Say, well, you're not being honest, and then you'll win the debate that way. But that was my first one. The second method I use, and this is one I've never seen anybody use, but this works very well. When I see that somebody is repeatedly lying or saying false things over and over, and I've corrected them a number of times, I start to number their errors, because either they are not registering that they're in error, or they're lying, or their mentality is not sinking in, or they're not being accountable. Like, they see it, but they just don't care. Like, for some reason, they're making errors and it's not impacting them. Like, if I made an error, if like somebody showed me in a debate, like I made two errors, 3 errors, like in a short span, I would be like, I should just like step back and reevaluate, because I'm making these errors and I don't want to make errors. So let me just get myself right here and think this through so I don't keep making errors. But when somebody makes errors with like no care, like they're saying false things and they're disproven and they don't care, I'm like, okay, this is time to start the counting method. I start counting their errors, and I tell them, you changed the subject. You changed it to what happened after Roe v. Wade was abolished. That wasn't the subject. The subject was, were pro-life people being cruel when they celebrated the overturning of Roe v. Wade? That's the question. And you changed the subject. And I said, that's not the question I asked, and I'm counting your errors now. That's 1 for changing the subject. And so that's the first one. And then in the next response, I keep counting. You do owe me, yourself and others and God, to be truthful. You dodged my question twice. Number 2. These are the types of things I count. Him changing the subject, not answering questions counts, contradicting yourself counts, logical fallacies count, outright false statements count. And by the way, I only count things that are like clear cut. I'm not counting like, it's my opinion, you're wrong, so I'm counting. No, I don't count that. I count objective errors. Like, these are objectively errors. And I said, you claimed what Allie said was not true. She said it wasn't cruel to celebrate the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Obviously, that one was true, right? And I'm counting that because he's dodging, and now I'm counting as an error because he's dodging. And I'm like, you're not cruel for celebrating the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That's ridiculous. That's obvious. And he says, it's not dodging. I'm cutting to the heart of, he's not cutting to the heart of the issue. He's changing the subject to something else. And he's reiterating, no, it's not untruthful that they were cruel for celebrating Roe. And you'll see his reasoning, but I debunk it too. But here goes. It is cruel to celebrate the thing that led to more dead babies, and for states to enshrine it but they're not celebrating, and for states to enshrine it in the Constitution. They're not celebrating dead babies. They don't expect there to be more dead babies, and they don't expect states to enshrine it in the Constitution and the shield laws and the telemedicine increase. Their intent and their celebration was not celebrating those things. It was to celebrate the overturning of Roe v. Wade, legally allowed abortion, which they view as murder, and I view as murder, and he views as murder. That's what they're celebrating. They're not celebrating all these things in the future. And as I said, when overturning of Roe v. Wade happened, nobody knew if abortions were going to go up or down. You claiming people celebrated because they thought more babies would be aborted is false. And that's your 4th error. They didn't think more abortions would happen. And that's what matters. Their intent is what matters. Why would a pro-life pro-life person celebrate more abortions? They wouldn't. And he said, and this is his twisted logic, we did know abortions were higher before Roe. He's saying originally in 1973. He's making another claim. Abortions were higher in 1972 and before 1973 when Roe v. Wade passed. That's his claim, which is absolutely untrue. And we'll go to that. We'll go to that later. I don't know why you would celebrate that. We're not celebrating that, sir. And I say, you absolutely did not know what the effect was. He did not know that there would be more abortions. There's no way that he expected abortions to be higher when Roe v. Wade passed. There's no way. And I said, it doesn't even matter if you thought that. And that's an error, him acting like it matters if he thought that or if anybody thought that. It matters what the people celebrating thought. Another error. And it wasn't cruel. Another error. You're not being honest and not admitting it. You read the stats pre-Roe abortion higher than they were than for the last 40 years. That is not true. That is not true. I'll just show you a quick graphic. He's claiming that abortions went up or were higher before 1973. The experts estimate it was like between 200,000 and a million because it's all illegal. It was all illegal abortion, so you don't know. But the experts say between 200 and a million. So even if you take the highest one, a million, that's slightly higher than 1974. And then it goes higher and higher and higher. There's an explosion. For the next 30 years, it's higher. It finally went under in Obama, like in 2011. And that was because more birth control, more sex education, less unwanted pregnancies. For whatever reason, teenagers were not as sexually active. He is pointing to Roe v. Wade as like the singular cause. And this is another thing that these pathological liars, these compulsive liars do. They will just cherry pick. He's like, I want it to be Roe v. Wade 40 years prior or 38 years prior. That's the reason why that abortions are lower in Obama years, because Roe v. Wade was legalized. But he's cherry picking Obama years. He's not looking at all these years where it went up. He's not considering unwanted pregnancies in general went down. Sex education went up. Contraception went up. But he's just cherry picking. He's just cherry picking. And I didn't even maybe see this the first time, honestly. Because I'm looking at it now, I'm like, that is absolutely untrue. That for the last 40 years, abortions have been lower than it was before Roe v. Wade in 1972 and before. Absolutely untrue. It only started to be lower under Obama. And that was for all those reasons I said. But he's cherry picking. He's cherry picking. The reason is Roe v. Wade was legalized 40 years ago. That's why abortions went down under Obama 38 years later. No. And I say, again, it doesn't matter if anyone thought it would go up. It only matters what pro-life people thought. If they think it's going to go down and this is going to save babies, that's what matters. Their intent is what matters. It doesn't matter if you thought it, which you did. You absolutely didn't. It doesn't matter. Even if you did, it wouldn't matter. And he just doubles down. It literally was higher under Roe v. Wade. No, it wasn't. I did look it up. And I say, no, it was lower. I looked it up. And this is the doozy. This is his twisted reasoning. That's what I'm saying, like with these compulsive liars. Intent, this is his tortured reasoning here. Their intent doesn't matter when the available data is easily accessible. You don't get to hide behind being ignorant. He's saying your ignorance that it was going to go up is not an excuse. Listen to an expert every once in a while. So he's saying there's many false statements here. The data wasn't easily accessible because nobody was saying it. He's claiming the experts said that abortions would go up. That is untrue. And he's saying they were ignorant. Well, everybody was ignorant. Nobody expected that to happen, including you. And it is an excuse. It is an excuse to be ignorant. Absolutely, ignorance is an excuse. If I have a cold and I don't know I have a cold and I shake somebody's hand and then they catch a cold from me, You can't blame me. I didn't know I had a cold. I didn't know I was contagious. Don't blame me. If, on the other hand, I do know I have a cold and I'm being reckless and irresponsible, shaking people's hand, not washing my hands, like, okay, you can say I'm being irresponsible at that point. But if I don't know, like, you can't blame me. Same way with these people that celebrate Roe v. Wade being overturned. You can't blame them. They don't know abortions are going to go up. And I say it was lower. It was lower pre-Roe v. Wade. I looked it up. Definitely was lower. And I say it's absolutely untrue that the experts expected abortions to go up. And that's why I asked Grok. I said, were people predicting that abortions would increase after Roe v. Wade was repealed? And it says no. All the consensus of experts expected abortions to go down, which is what I expected. I hadn't heard even one person say it. I lived during that time. I hadn't ever heard one person, famous person, any pundit, politician, even random people on Twitter or Facebook. I hadn't heard even one person say, oh, you know what? Abortions probably will go up because of overturning Roe v. Wade. Nobody said that. Nobody said that. And that's what he's claiming. He's saying people knew, these experts knew, and these pro-life people should have known. They should have listened to all these experts that were saying that. No, these experts weren't saying that. They couldn't have known. Nobody knew. It wasn't available data. It wasn't easily accessible, and you didn't have it either. Like, everything he's saying is a lie. And this is your sociology teacher, Mr. Student. This person just makes up things out of nothing. And well, we'll see why he thinks this later. It's kind of funny why he thinks this, because he tries to back himself up later, but it just completely blows up in his face. But I say, look, Grok says, I asked Grok, and Grok basically says, I couldn't find one person who said that. There were no sources reviewed indicating widespread pre-overturn predictions of an increase. Instead, the focus was on expected reductions and their potential societal impacts. Yes, he couldn't find one source that said that. And then he's going back to, he's trying to prove that abortions were higher pre-1973, pre-Roe v. Wade in this tweet. And he's saying 800,000 to 100,000. Well, that's a high estimate. Experts say 200,000 to 1 million because they were all illegal, so you don't really have accurate numbers. Then he's saying under Obama, it was 600. So it's like, you can't say it went up you can't say there was less abortions when it was only less abortions 35 years later. You see the tortured reasoning here? And this is just the compulsive lying. I feel like I'll say what I was going to say before. Like, these people, they come up with an idea and then they choose to believe it. Like, they're like, okay, I like this idea. I'm gonna pour my belief energy into it. Like you're filling up a cup or something, a carafe. You're like, I like this idea. I'm gonna pour my belief into it, and I'm going to stand on that and represent it. Like, that's what I feel like compulsive liars do. I mean, I've had relationships with people that I was like, this person is like a pathological liar or a compulsive liar. I've had a few in my life, so I see the patterns, and it's like they come up with an idea and pour their belief into it. It's like George Costanza in Seinfeld. It's not a lie if you believe it. So they've gotten to a point where I think they almost think, if I believe it, then it is true. It's not just, I'll be more convincing to other people. Like, it is true because I poured my belief into that. And it's almost like they think that it's a really delusional thought. Like, no, truth exists beyond you. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but that doesn't make things true. But did you notice he goes back to this? He's trying to prove that abortions were more after Roe v. Wade in 1973. But because after 35 years, they trended down in the 90s, they started trending down. And finally, in the Obama years, they got to pre-1973 rates. And that's your proof that legalizing abortion caused abortions to go down? That's your proof that 35 years later, they went down. But the 35 years right after Roe v. Wade was passed and abortions went up, that doesn't matter. See the cherry picking? It absolutely matters. It matters the most the years right after it. That's what matters the most. So 35 years later, after all kinds of different trends, birth control, sex education, less unwanted pregnancies, less sexual activity of teenagers and young adults. It doesn't matter. Apparently it doesn't matter. It only matters that it was legalized 35 years ago. Unbelievable. This is your teacher. This is your pastor. With that tortured reasoning, this is your sociology teacher. And I called him out because I'm like, look, I just proved that the experts weren't expecting higher abortions after Roe v. Wade was repealed. I just proved that by citing Grok. And he didn't acknowledge it. So I'm holding his feet to the fire. I was like, you skipped the part where you admitted fault. You claimed the experts said they expected abortions to go down. That was false, right? Therefore, you saying people were ignorant was false because everybody was ignorant. There was no reasonable expectation that they could know that. And so you claiming they have no excuse because they were ignorant. No, that's false too, right? Which eliminates your argument for them being cruel. They were cruel because they were ignorant. No, you cannot expect them to have known all those things Democrats would have done and abortions would go up. You cannot expect that. And I'm holding his feet to the fire and he says, your Grok search is not good evidence. You're just hand waving it. This is good evidence. 35 years later, abortions go down below 1973, 1972 rates. That's good evidence, but Grok is not good evidence. Grok, who is listing all the sources, you can click these. You can't click them from the screenshot, but I could click them on the Grok screen. I can click on these sources. I mean, Grok is just summarizing all the findings, saying that's not a good source. You can just dismiss, like I don't want to believe Grok is a good source, so I'm not going to believe it now. And so I start to call him out. I'm like, the thing that is happening here is you got caught in a lie about the experts. They didn't expect it to go higher. You lied about that to make up a false reason to impugn pro-lifers as cruel. I think that's cruel, actually, to slander all those good people who just want to save babies, and you slander them as cruel. For a pastor to do that? Yeah, you should examine your heart. Yeah, is he a Christian, by the way? And I see this one person post this on his thing, Jaymes Lackey, a leftist who pretends to be a Christian. Yeah, is he really a Christian? And then he goes back again. He says, it didn't save lives. That's not the point, dude. That's not the point. They expected it to save lives. That's the point. There was no reasonable expectation that they would be able to know what would happen in the future, that abortions would go up. They couldn't have known that. It doesn't matter what happened. It matters their intent. They say, we went through this. It doesn't matter what the outcome was. I said, it doesn't matter. It only matters what pro-left people thought would happen. That's the only thing in their intent. That's the only thing that matters. And he's saying that it's like letting your kids play in the street and then they die and then saying, I didn't know. My intent was to have fun. Well, you could say that might be like a dereliction of duty. You could say, even if you want to claim the dereliction of the parent in anticipating harm to their child as a form of cruelty, which is very twisted, that would only apply if the harm could be anticipated. Like if I'm sick and I don't know it and I get somebody else sick, that was not anticipated because I had no symptoms at the time. So you can't claim I'm being cruel unless it can be anticipated. And it couldn't be anticipated that abortions would go up after Roe v. Wade. It couldn't be. And nobody thought that. By your own admission, that should be determined by the experts. That's what he said. He says, you should listen to experts. And then I put it back on the experts. I said, the experts expected it to go lower. And you said, listen to the experts. He said, y'all should listen to the experts sometimes. I'm like, and then I showed him the experts agreed with me and agreed they thought abortions would go down. And now he's being a hypocrite. Now he doesn't care about the experts. See, it's so selective. He's like, I want to believe this thing. And so therefore now the experts matter. And then when the experts say the opposite thing, now I just won't even consider that at all. It's so much duplicitousness and dishonesty. He should be reprimanded by his church for this, quite frankly, or whoever's around him in his church, they should reprimand him. This is just awful behavior. And I imagine this is probably a pattern with him, to be frank. And that's part of the reason I'm making this video, so people can be informed. And he's saying your Grok search doesn't count for anything. Well, no, it actually does. And I'm like, Grok cited sources, sir. If you don't want Grok, I can give you the sources. And further, and this is another big L, I said one of the sources Grok used was the same source you just used. Grok used gutmocker.org. And it's good for him when he thinks it supports his case, but when Grok uses it, no. It's no good. It's no good. Right? And I said, one of the sources Grok used was the same source you used. Hypocrisy. It's not good when you use it for your argument, but bad when it goes against you. No, that's not how it works. That's duplicity. That's lying. Are you a Church of Satan pastor? Is what I'm starting to wonder, because he's got so much deception and duplicitousness. I'm not going to argue with your Grok search. So you're just making an arbitrary hand-waving argument. I'm not going to deal with that. And then he tries to pull rank. I teach these things for a living. You really shouldn't be. I teach these things for a living. Just because you didn't know either, and the experts didn't know. And wasn't able to predict, neither were you, neither were the experts, doesn't mean the experts know they weren't able to. And by the way, at this point, he's presented nothing. I presented Grok, who had several sources. He's presented nothing. I present the Grok screenshot of the summary of all the sources, and he just waves his hand like, no, it's not. I don't deal with Grok. Like, oh, okay, well, that's convenient, isn't it? I said, you didn't even look at the details. You just thought it was Grok. It goes against my argument. Reject. That's what he did. Experts expected abortions to go down. They absolutely did. You presented nothing to the contrary and can't. And you lied saying you expected abortions to go up after Roe v. Wade was repealed. He's just getting manhandled right now. Grok isn't something worthy of needing to present something. Yes, it actually is. It actually is. Grok is just a summary of pertinent sources. And I'm not sure if you know how Grok works. It's not a person. It's a summary of pertinent sources. It used medical research orgs, KFF, and Cardiology Advisor. They just track these things. Use Gutmocker, which is the same source you use, 26 for hypocrisy. 26 error for hypocrisy. Major news orgs like NBC, NYT, New York Times, and The Atlantic. Do you reject all these sources? Because I want to know. Tell me now if you reject. He can't say he rejects it because he just used one of them. And I want him to say, yes, I reject NBC, New York Times, and The Atlantic. Those are liberal-leaning sources. That would be great if he would do that. He's not going to reject them. But if he accepts them, then I will present what they said about the experts' expectations. And then he'll be debunked. And then he'll have to admit, okay, these pro-lifers who celebrated, the experts did say that they expected abortions to go down. So I can't reasonably expect these pro-lifers to have expected the abortion rates to go up. So if I can't do that, I can't make the argument they're cruel because they're ignorant, because there was no way they could have known that. And so I'll have to admit that, yeah, my original statement saying everything that Allie Beth Stuckey said, at least this one's not true. Like that you're cruel for celebrating over. See, that's the tangled web, the cascade of lie on top of lie on top of lie on top of lie. If he admits this, then all his lies will crumble, right? So he's trying to play the game like, Grok is not worthy. And I'm like, okay, well, forget Grok. What about all the sources Grok used? We can just bypass Grok. I'll show you the sources. How about that? And then he says, AI is poison. Like, okay, I'm off of AI. My question was about those sources, sir. Why did you dodge? And he's going to dodge. And basically, I'll just summarize the next like 20 posts. He's just dodging. I'll leave this link in the description if anybody wants to go see it. And then he wants to say, yeah, take the L and move to the next. He keeps saying move on. He wants to he wants to move on because he's getting destroyed. He's getting killed on this. So he's like, let's move on to the next. That's what's the problem with laundry lists, is you debunk one and then say, okay, well, and they want to change it to something else. Let's go into something else on the laundry list. No, we're not going to something else until we settle this. That's how it works. Because this is how it would happen. Because I have a lot of experience, thousands of these types of conversations. What would happen is if I took the bait and I said, okay, we'll move on to the next one, and I debunked that, he is not going to be honest about that either. He's not going to be honest about the easiest one with how many obvious false things that I've shown that he said, the contradictions, the terrible logic, the outright false statements that I've demonstrated already that he's made. He is not going to accept anything. If he's not going to accept this, he's not going to accept anything. That's the real problem, is he's not being honest. That's a real problem with most people you face online. They're having trouble coming to terms with truth. They want the lie narrative. For some reason, they have a hook in themselves. They want the lie narrative. That's what's driving them. So when you show them the truth, and if you're a person who values truth, and you're like, I showed them the truth, why won't they accept this? Like, well, you're projecting your value of truth onto them. Like, he doesn't have a value of truth. And he says, take the L. I'm like, bro, you've taken 35 L's. And this is where I get down to the root problem here, as I was saying. Listing out in text what AI mentioned isn't compelling. I'm just asking, and basically what I was doing, I was just asking, do you accept these sources? Do you like these sources? I want him to say that he accepts the source. He could say NBC is fine, and I'll present him the NBC article. He could say New York Times is fine. I'll present him the New York Times article. I want him to say beforehand, because he already moved the goalpost on Grok. I presented Grok, says, oh, Grok isn't reputable. Okay, well, do you think New York Times is reputable? Won't say. Do you think NBC is reputable? Won't say. Do you think The Atlantic is reputable? Won't say. He won't say any of them, because he knows then I'll prove it. Experts didn't expect that, and then I'll debunk all the cascade of lies that he said already. And then he tries to pull rank again. He says, I grade college papers. You have no business grading anything. You've gotten almost every single point wrong. Anyway, if you post a screenshot of an AI search, I fail you. Well, I'm not writing a paper, sir. And then I'm like, you decided XYZ in another situation. That's my proof. I'm right here. You grade papers and you decide what you think is good or bad. So therefore you can decide what's good or bad in general in the world. That's not how it works. What does your students writing sources out have to do with my question asking you what your opinion is about a specific source? So he's conflating. Just because they used a source and I'm mentioning sources, he conflated them together, even though it's a totally different subject. Just because I use the word source, this is more conflating errors, conflating things into misrepresent. You didn't give me a specific source to consider. I'm like, I did give you specific. I gave you 6. I wrote out 6 specific sources. And he's like, you didn't give any content. I'm like, yeah, I'm not giving you content yet because you're moving the goalposts every time. Tell me which sources you like, and then I will provide you the link. And I already told him that. I told him that here. And he says, that would be a failing grade if you just write sources. I'm like, I didn't write sources at the end of the paper. I asked you what you thought about a specific source. You failed to answer. Everything he says is a lie. I don't know if he said one true thing in this entire conversation. Like, the only true thing he said was at the beginning, like abortions went up after Roe v. Wade was repealed. That was like maybe the only true thing he said in this whole conversation. Still won't move. Because he wants me to provide it. And I'm like, maybe I should just provide him a source just because he's threatening to block me if I don't. Because we're at a standstill. I'm like, you tell me if you like this source, if you accept this source, then I'll show you. And he's saying, and he's dodging that and just saying, just show me. I'm like, well, if I show you, you can move the goalpost again, which you probably would have. I was like, I was debating to myself. I'm like, should I just show him one of the sources? And I'm like, no, I don't want to cave. Because I think it would have been fine. Honestly, in hindsight, it would have been fine either way if I'd have showed him a source. And one of the sources was NBC. And I saw on his feed that he had shared something from NBC News. So if he would have said, I don't accept this source, I could have said, like, well, you shared NBC News twice, so you're being a hypocrite again. But I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's because he really should just say, like, what's so bad about just saying, yeah, those sources are fine. Show me the link. Like, what's so bad about that? Because he wants to probably just wanted to dismiss the source, like he dismissed Grok. And I just say, like, this is going to be good content. I'm going to make this video because I was like, I really should expose this guy. This guy could be in a church or a teacher saying all kinds of nonsense. He's like a a big Trump critic, like he was criticizing Allie for being America first with this false choice fallacy. How can you seek God and also seek America first? Like, okay, false choice fallacy. So he's a big Trump critic. He's a critic of conservatives to the point where he won't even admit like pro-lifers. And he is pro-life, according to Grok. It's much more easy to just be black and white. And maybe that's his motivation for all these lies. It's just like, I can think of myself as a good person. I really think it's probably just like for a lot of people, it's just like the fear of man. They know if they say the truth, like they'll get a lot of heat from people. And I think this is probably what's going on with him. He just wants to get along and be liked. Saying the truth is not popular in some ways. Like, and if I say all these lies to conservatives, they're much nicer to me. So I'm just going to say the lies. Then at least, like, especially as a college lecturer, right? Most of the people around him are probably liberal. But if all the people around him are saying all these lies, like just to get along, he could just say all these lies, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's not valid. It's not a valid reason. You got to say what's true. I mean, Jesus died for saying what's true. Paul died for saying, like, or all the apostles died. A lot of them died for saying what's true. Like, it's not popular with the world to say the truth. Like, it's much more popular to say all these lies that he's saying with the world, with your college, probably, maybe with your church, maybe with your community, because Chico is like Northern California, which is probably pretty liberal. I don't know how close that is to San Francisco, but probably a pretty liberal area. So he's probably gets a lot of benefit for maintaining these positions. And I'm like, that's not a good enough reason, dude. That's not, you got to side with truth. Like truth is paramount. Truth is paramount. I mean, he's accusing Allie, can you be America? Can you follow God and be America? Now I'm just thinking back. I'm like, this was a total projection, because this has nothing to do with what she's saying. She's just saying, look at all these false accusations against conservatives. And he's like, how can you be America first and also seek first the kingdom of God? Like, that doesn't really relate to what she's saying. And now I see it. I'm like, this was a projection by him. He has a conflict in him, either seeking first the kingdom of God or seeking first his politics. He's accusing her of being in a conflict. You're in a conflict, and he projected that onto her. When people make accusations like this, that's why I thought it was so weird. I'm like, this is a really weird response. Like, this has nothing to do with what she said. When people make accusations based on without a rationale, without backup, it's almost always projection. And this is the contradiction that he's in. Seeking God, if he is at all, and his politics first. This is the contradiction that he's in, and he's projecting that onto her. And look, and every fork in the road, he chooses his politics. Because if you're seeking God, like, seek truth, like, tell the truth. That's just a basic value, not just for Christians, but for anybody. But so he didn't block me, but we went on, like, I counted a total of 72 errors, but I wanted to show you just a few of the other ones. And this is his proof that experts, plural, thought that abortions would go up after the repeal of Roe v. Wade in 2022. This lady, Mary Ziegler, and she says, is it surprising that abortions went up after Roe v. Wade was repealed? She says, it isn't surprising in a sense. This is his proof. This vague, it isn't surprising in a sense. That's not a clear, and this was 2025 when they asked her. They're like, were you surprised when abortions went up after Roe v. Wade? She said, it isn't surprising in a sense. And he's choosing to say this proves that all the experts said this vague little comment that is not concrete at all after the fact, 3 years after the fact. If you ask me, 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, did you expect the Patriots to win the Super Bowl? And I'm like, it's not. Were you surprised when the Patriots won the Super Bowl? I'm like, it isn't surprising in a sense. That doesn't prove I thought they were going to win the Super Bowl beforehand. It's easy to say after the fact. Yeah, it wasn't surprising that happened. Yeah, of course. After the fact, it's easy to say that in hindsight. And so I'm like, after the fact saying that doesn't mean anything. That's not proof. I'm saying the consensus of experts before the fact expected abortions to go down. You're just a liar. And then he makes up this lie after the fact. That's what I was referring to the whole time. No, you weren't. You absolutely were not referring to after the fact, 3 years after the fact the whole time. That makes no sense. Then how can you impugn these people before the fact, these pro-lifers, as cruel for not knowing something before the fact? If you're saying, no, I wasn't talking about after the fact, before the fact. I was talking about after the fact. Well, that makes no sense. It's just more lies. It's just a lie on top of lie on top of lie. You don't know. I do know the consensus of experts. You don't read the letter. I read the two. I don't need to read that water is wet or that the sun is bright, sir. I don't need to read it. It's obvious. If you outlaw something, it's going to go down. That's what everybody thought, including the experts. And I did read after Grok sent me those links, I did read 2 of the links, and it confirmed, yeah, experts thought abortions would go down. And then I thought, you know what? He's saying what this woman, Mary Ziegler, who's supposedly like this knowledgeable abortion person on the left, I don't really know her, but I was like, I want to see what she said before the fact, because this will be another giant L for him. And look what it says. It says, this is what she said in May 2022, before Roe v. Wade was repealed. She said on PBS, to the extent we're going to see a decline in abortion rate of Roe, if Roe is overturned, it will be comparably modest. So she's expecting a mild decrease in abortion. She's not expecting abortions to go up. This was his reason for thinking all the experts thought beforehand that abortions would go up. This woman. And she's saying abortions will modestly go down in this interview. And then in this one, in many instances, the abortion rate will not go down, even in post-Roe United States. So she's not saying it's going up. She's saying it's not going to go down. In some places, saying not in purple or blue states. And in this one, we may not see that much of a decline in the abortion rate. So she's saying she expects a modest decline. And that was Grok's summary. She's expecting a modest decline. This was this person he based it all on. And then he says, that AI screenshot proves my point. He read this and said, yes, she was expecting a increase. Why? Because she says, in many instances, the abortion will not go down, even in post-Roe USA. In many instances, that means in many places. That means blue and purple states, which was true. She's not talking about the overall rate. When she did mention the overall rate, she said, I expect a modest decline in abortion rates. And he's going to look at this and say, oh, no, this means what I think. Like, no, it's not supporting you. How duplicitous can a person be? A pastor. This is a pastor. And then one more thing. And then when I challenged him again on, you never expected it. You never expected abortions to go higher after Roe v. Wade was repealed. You guaranteed. He says, and this is his proof to say he did. You know, there are less abortions now than before Roe v. Wade was law, right? Making it illegal doesn't make it go away. That's his proof to prove that he expected abortions to go up after Roe v. Wade is overturned. This is his proof. Him saying that making it illegal doesn't eliminate abortions. This is his proof. Even on things that say the opposite of what he thinks or wants to support, he'll believe it. But there's people like him. I hope you got something out of it. As far as the counting method, I counted 72 errors. And honestly, I mean, I counted up to 72 with him. Some people are just like so ingrained in their thinking and so much of liars. Like it takes you counting to kind of get their attention. And I do notice that when I use this method, a lot of times the steam will go out of their sails like later on in the conversation, because I'm counting higher and higher, numbers getting higher and higher, and it's like, okay, because you're creating doubt in them, and they should have doubt because they're wrong. If they're getting up to like dozens of errors, yeah, you should have doubt. You should. That's normal. And maybe their shame sensor is not working very well. Like they don't have good shame and guilt happening But if you say it like over and over and over, and maybe they've been told these false narratives for years, and they've been hundreds of times they've heard these false narratives. So you just saying it once, it's like that may not do anything. But if you just reiterate, no, you're wrong on this point, you're wrong on this point, you're wrong on this point, you are doing a lot of good in creating doubt about the things they believe, which they should have doubt if they're wrong. So and it's very satisfying too, because if you don't do this, people like this guy would say, oh yeah, no, I didn't make any errors. This method, I just hammered home the one point. I just went with it, and he never admitted it, so I didn't move on to another point. Didn't need to move on to another point. And he was basically asking me, please move on to something else. Like, no, I'm not moving on until you admit it. Because that's the real problem, is your dishonesty. That's the real problem. And counting up to 72, it's just, it is what it is. And that's satisfying too, because it's like, no, definitely you were wrong. And every time you count, you're just reminding them. You're reminding them you're wrong, and you've consistently been wrong. And now you're up to 30. Now you're up to 40. I usually don't count past 30. I don't know why 30 became like the number. I was like, after 30, I'm like, dude, I've counted 30 errors with you. The pattern is clear. You're wrong. And you have no accountability and not being honest or in good faith, because you're not recognizing, you're not admitting these errors or correcting these errors the way a person in good faith would. So this is really your problem, is your honesty problem. And why are these people not being honest? Like, there could be a lot of reasons. But as far as like somebody like this, I would probably even recommend not engaging with them. After you see they're dishonest, like, because it's probably a waste of your time. Like for me, I was not feeling good at the time. I was sick, and I was not feeling well, and I was bored, so I had nothing to do. So I was like, I'll just go back and forth because I was enjoying it. But I wanted to expose this church planter, this pastor, as the liar that he conducts himself as. So if you got something on this video, please comment below. I would love to hear from you. And I pray for this guy. Pray he gets it right. I mean, this is not good. I keep going. It's like so unbelievable to me. You're 40 years. I don't know how old he is. I'm just guessing he's around 40 with these kids this age. But I'm like, dude, you're 40 years old doing this garbage. This is what you're doing. Like, just complete cope and saying definitely false things. Like, this is what you're doing. Yeah, you don't know like what he's been through or why or any of that. And I guess it's probably not even like no use in even thinking about. I don't know why I like to figure out what makes people tick. And it's probably what I said. It's probably he just wants to be liked. He just wants to be liked by the people around him in his spheres of influence. And he's been told, like, this is the nice thing. It's much easier to get along with people if you're like all accepting, right? You're like, I'm going to accept everything and everybody. But that's a very liberal way of doing it. That's not biblical. The Bible tells us this is what's true. This is what's false. Like, reason and evidence would say this is what's true. This is what's false. And making dividing lines is not popular with some people, even though it's very important to do, and it's biblical to do, to say this is the way it is. Like, homosexuality is wrong, abortion is wrong, these things are wrong. Like, for a society to function, you need certain standards. But some people don't like those standards because they're on the wrong side of the standard. So they can get very upset with you. And so what liberalism did is saying, oh, no standards at all. Just do your thing. We're going to accept you. We're going to accept everybody, and we're going to get along. As long as nobody tells anybody else they're wrong for something, for some choice, from lifestyle choice, we're just going to be all accepting. And that is the pattern of the world. That's not the pattern of the Bible. Society just degrades if you don't have that. And that's what you see in liberal areas, just the drug abuse, the sexual promiscuity, and just the trans stuff and the homosexual stuff, and just a mess. And you see trash on the streets because there's no standards. They've completely given up standards. It's like, we accept all, but that's what you get. You get the degrading of society when that happens. And That's why you need people to say, this is the standard, and we're going to enforce this standard. And people don't like that. It's not always popular. It's not popular if you tell your son or daughter, yeah, you need to clean your room. You need to get your room clean. You need to do your homework. Like, that's not popular. You'd be more popular and the fun parent if you were like, no, do anything you want to do. Like, kids would be, yay, yay. But then they get degraded over time, right? Yeah. So you need those standards. You need certain standards. And you need to enforce those standards. That's good for a child. In the moment, it's hard sometimes. You don't want to clean your room, but it's good. It's good for them. So maybe that's his thing. He just wants to get along. And liberalism is the fast track to get along. But as I said, this may be the conflict he's having. Seeking God first, or seeking to get along with liberals first. Like, this may be the conflict he's having that he just projected on her. But anyway, God bless him. I wish him the best. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.